Henry King. He was the prosecutor at the Milch trial.
Milch one. You know, they mentioned something afterwards. There were 11 more trials.
Correct.
And so I wrote them down. I came up with 7. I can't. The other 4 are lost. I don't know. There may have been some individuals too. I mean, I remember.
Milch was one of the 11. Edward Milch, and there was a few others associated with him. Ben Ferencz, who was the chief prosecutor of the Eisengruppen case.
The Einsatzgruppen. Einsatzgruppen.
Yeah, you are. Thank you for
I make it right,
pronunciation.
sure. Well, do you remember who the head was of the Einsatzgruppen? His first name was Otto. I tried to remember, but I couldn't.
The chief defendant?
Yeah, in the Einsatzgruppen.
Okay.
Do you have it?
Yes. Here, I'll give this to you.
Okay.
This is a book that I just got.
No, you got it from the library, or where did you?
Actually, eBay. I bought it, and it was the auction house, and this dealt with the Eisengruppen, case, and it's written by the chief judge of that case.
Of the Einsatzgruppen?
Yes.
Do you think I could borrow that and I mail it to you?
Absolutely.
Or you need it now?
No, I don't need. I need it today for right now for our conversation. But get us, if you could, tell me your story. I know you were born in Germany.
Yes.
And give me a little background, your biography.
My biography, I left Germany in '39. I went to England. I worked first.
Where were you raised in Germany?
In Western Germany, near Cologne, near Düsseldorf.
Right.
And as I say, I left in '39, just in the nick of time before the war broke out.
Why did you leave?
Because I'm Jewish.
Okay.
And
Did
there wasn't a future anymore. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen afterwards. But anyway, for a young person, there was no future. By the time war broke out, my one sister was in Amsterdam, one sister was in New York, and I was in London, and my parents were in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed behind. So anyway, I went to London on a domestic permit, as it was called.
How old were you?
20.
20?
I told you my age, so I don't have to.
That was not a trick question. I'm sorry.
No, well, anyway, I had told you my age before.
You did.
I didn't know I would meet you personally. I wouldn't have told you my age.
Well, this video will never. When they look at you and they say you're not as old as you look.
Pardon me?
You don't look as old as you really are. So
thank you. That's what the judge said to me before he fined me $60 for going through a stop sign.
And so, when you left, what family did you leave behind?
I left my parents behind.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Well, I said one sister was in Amsterdam and the other sister was in New York.
They'd already
left. I
left.
was in London as well. My parents perished in Auschwitz, and so did my sister, both my sisters were very much older, and so did my sister, who lived in Amsterdam at the time. She went to Holland in '33 already, but then they caught up with her there, so that was the story. And I got there on a domestic permit. And I worked as a waitress. I worked as a maid for 2 years, which wasn't very pleasant with the bombs falling and everything.
Right.
And then afterwards, I worked as a waitress, which was a little bit better. The bombs were still falling, and the V1s and the V2s. And then I heard that the U.S. War Department, or it was the State Department at the time, were looking for people bilingual, German and English. So I applied, and that was quite a rigorous test so that I had to take. And so I got the job, and I worked there for a year and a half. There was censorship. I did some translations. At first I censored the mail, and we got some information out of that. Not too much, but a little bit.
Now, you were censoring this for the Americans?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the German letters
German letters, right?
for the Americans. And then if you found anything, you have to submit whatever it was and so forth. And it was passed on to, I forgot who. And then that folded, and I applied at the War Crimes Lab. We used to call it OCC, it's actually OCCWC,
Yeah.
Office of the Chief Counsel for War Crimes.
Right.
So, and I did.
How did you know about that? How did you?
Somebody, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was through the grapevine, I suppose.
Right.
So, anyway, so that was pretty nice.
Yeah.
A bit easier. So they gave me the, well, not they gave me, I mean, I was one of those who worked on the Krupp trial.
Tell me, how did it work? How did it work practically? You were assigned. Where did you stay? Where were your offices?
Where did I what?
Where was your office in Nuremberg?
It was right in the, you've seen it.
We've seen the pictures.
Yeah, well, it was in the film.
Right.
It was the courthouse.
Courthouse.
Yes. There were, I mean, it had been bombed, and if you wanted to go from Office A to Office B, you sometimes had to go around this, because
Right.
there was still a lot of damage, but they had a lot of office and so forth. So I was one of the translators. I didn't know one end of a gun from the other. It's, like in the army, are you sure? Who knows shorthand? Go and see the cook, he's shorthanded, like, so it gave me this kind of thing. And
As the translator, you would be given documents by your boss,
yeah,
which would be in German, and then your job was.
translated them into English, yes.
And would anybody check what you're doing? Would there be a?
Yeah, I think my boss, I think there was somebody who automatically went through the translations and so forth.
And then that person would actually, would they verify that that's a correct translation so it could be used in court? Would there be a?
I guess so.
I guess so, yeah.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I didn't worry about that.
As you were reading some of these documents for the Krupp case,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing a little bit of the background of the Krupp industry and its involvement with
Mm-hmm.
Hitler and the Third Reich and everything that happened in your family, how could you be objective?
Well, actually, yes, because for one, I mean, the one thing was the slave labor,
Sure.
and he was convicted on that.
Mhm.
Incidentally, it was his son who took the rap for the whole thing. I
Right.
suppose he wasn't innocent either, but the father was too ill to take
That's right.
to trial. And but I found, the gun, this gun, and that gun, and this part for this gun, and so forth. Oh my God! I mean, you own. It was the largest weapon. What do you call weapon or whatever you call it, ammunition, whatever it is. Plant in Germany. So there's a war. You don't say, no, I'm not going to give you that because I don't think it's right that you're starting a war. And so, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, I thought the whole thing was wasted, quite frankly.
Mhm.
I mean, the slave labor, that was one thing. But the weapons and all this thing that I was translating, I couldn't warm up to that.
Right.
I mean, there were so many other things that were much more important than how many weapons had been supplied and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
So I didn't see that. I mean, I'm glad they caught him on he got convicted on the slave labor. That was
Mhm.
one thing, and I think I.G. Farben was another company
Mhm.
that was convicted on that.
Right.
But whether we had anything to do or not, whenever they handed down the sentence, I think the verdict and the sentence came at the same time,
Mhm.
if I remember correctly.
On the Krupp case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, in any case.
Okay.
Well, as I say, I wasn't at the main trial. I
Right.
wasn't working at censorship at the main trial. I think I was in Nuremberg when they were hanged.
Oh,
Some
were you?
of them, yes. I mean, I didn't see it.
No, yeah.
But I knew. I mean, it was we were told.
Let me just stop there for a second.
Yeah.
If you were there about that time, among the population there, was there sort of a reaction to what was going on behind the prison walls? Was there,
You mean the German population?
Yeah. did you get a sense? Were they interested?
I didn't have much to do with the German population except for I think we had a couple of typists, young girls who
Mhm.
were, who worked, who typed whatever we had written because I think we wrote everything by hand, yeah.
Right.
We didn't have a typewriter, and certainly not a computer. And, they were young girls who didn't say anything. Otherwise, they were, for one thing, you never ever met a Nazi. There was nobody there who'd ever been a Nazi. And the few that admitted it said, yeah, well, we had to. But you couldn't find any Nazis. Nobody was there. Nobody ever had been a Nazi. So.
I think
I
it was somebody who mentioned that a book had been written that after the war there were 300,000 German ski instructors. Nobody had ever been a Nazi and part of the membership, you know?
Ski instructor?
Well, just in a joke.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Nobody admitted that they were part of the party membership.
Yeah. Well, if you talked about that skis, I just remember that's the one time I felt sorry for the Germans. I shouldn't have. I think they got up 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock to get on that train to, it was either Garmisch or Berchtesgaden, I forgot where it went. And then we went on, and they were all thrown out.
Is that right?
Every one of them had to leave because we went on there. And half the train was empty, I guess. Not beyond that many of us, then there were Germans who had been there. They wanted to go skiing. Anyways, that's just besides.
While you're there, not only at the end of the first trial, but also as you're there at the subsequent trial, did you get any sense that the German population in Nuremberg had any interest at all in what was going on in the courthouse itself?
I'm not sure.
Were the newspapers covering it?
Did they have? I'm trying to think. I think all I read was the army newspaper?
Stars and Stripes?
Yeah. Is it called Stars and Stripes? I guess so. Don't remember.
Did you have a chance, while you were working on the Krupp case and doing the translation, did you actually go into the courtroom itself?
Oh, yes, that's what I was going to tell you. Whenever the verdict or the sentence, I think they came together.
They could have been, yeah.
And I still hear this, to be hung by the neck until you're dead, and may God have mercy upon your soul. And I can still hear this one after the other, and it probably was never carried out. What I would like to know, and you told me what his name was, the man in charge of the Einsatzgruppen, Otto somebody.
Otto Ollendorf.
Good. I would have never remembered that. Did anything happen to him?
He was sentenced to be hanged.
To be hanged, yeah. And was he?
I haven't gotten that far in the book. I don't know.
Oh, you haven't finished the book
No,
yet?
but you can read it. I just got it. But did you happen, during that case, were you a spectator during that particular case?
Yes, well, quite often we went, you knew beforehand, this is going to be it, they've been being convicted or sentenced or both. And then we went into the courtroom, and we had these microphones. Now, I don't know whether it still was in Russian and French. It was definitely in English and in German, so you could listen to either one, whichever you wanted. Sometimes we checked up on the interpreters to see whether they interpreted right.
Interesting, yeah.
They put one and the other, yes. So, oh yes, no, that was very exciting. I mean, going up into the courtroom. Or sometimes when we had nothing to do, went up, just to. And then one other thing is sometimes they needed something translated from English into German. And I don't know why this always happened at night, but there was the person, the man in charge, he got all his friends together, so there were 6 or 8 of us. And it was in the middle of the night. And most of the time we just slept. And then something came down, and then one of us got up and had to translate it. And we got a lot of time for that. I mean, credit.
Yeah.
And we weren't paid for that. I think we must have, taken vacations and things like that for the extra time that we accumulated there.
During this particular case, the Eisengruppen case,
And that's good, yeah.
yeah, keep correcting me, I'll get it right.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to correct
No,
you.
please do, because I don't really know.
It's a mouthful.
It
German
is.
is rather hard to learn, I know.
But did the name Otto Ollendorf, now that you heard it, was
I think so.
Was he the star defendant?
He was yes, and I listened to him quite often. He was a charming man. You didn't, unless you thought of what he had done, he was absolutely charming.
Mm-hmm.
And he took it, you knew he was going to be, now was he hanged? Oh, you didn't get that?
I don't know yet. But he was sentenced to be hanged.
Yeah, I know, I was there.
Yeah.
I listened to it. I knew. I mean, it was a given because he was. I mean, that was the absolute worst. We did read, it wasn't only in the court case. Sometimes something else came up. I mean, what these people did. I mean, they followed the army, and then they rounded up the Jews and the gypsies and whatever, and just shot them.
Yeah.
Just shot them cold blood. I remember one picture that I saw a family, father, mother, and a little girl, all dressed in outdoor clothes very nicely. I mean, they were lying face down. They had just come in or gone out or something, and they were just shot like that. I mean, you've seen, Schindler's List.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these things happen, like this guy just stood there and he just aimed at whoever happened to be there.
While you were listening to the testimony during the trial, did you get a sense that the German defendants were remorseful?
No.
No.
Well, the only one I have this, I don't know whether you read this for Speer.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the major defendants,
Mm-hmm.
and he was remorseful. He was the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And the others, I mean, they were little fish kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not Ollendorf, but some of the others that they had later on, like Krupp. I mean, sure. I mean, of course, they all pleaded not guilty. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which every you plead not guilty either.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anyhow,
Right.
don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You find I'm pleading not guilty. You find out. You find out whether I'm guilty
That's
or
right.
not. Nobody said I'm guilty, I guess. So that was that.
You-
But I remember once, and I don't know whether it was the original or whether it was a copy. I saw a letter addressed to Rommel.
Mm.
Somebody had brought it to him, and the order was to go with this man in his car and to commit suicide. And I don't remember the wording or everything. He said goodbye to his wife. He knew exactly what's happened because he was involved in that putsch. You know what putsch is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Against Hitler,
Mhm.
went on. And I mean, he was too famous a man and too well known and too popular. They couldn't hang him with all the others.
Mm-hmm.
So so he had to commit suicide. And then I suppose the Germans were told that he'd been killed in the war or something. But that was his story.
So you saw a letter to that effect.
I saw the letter. I don't remember whether it was the original or whether it was a copy. That I can't remember. I mean, it was in German.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. What other reflections do you have on your days at Nuremberg?
What do you mean?
Oh, just anecdotes or what was the, first of all, let's drop back a little bit. When you looked outside a window where you were working and you saw the city of Nuremberg.
Well, it was in ruins. It was completely in ruins.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen pictures
Mhm.
of it. I remember once we traveled quite a bit. It was in Frankfurt once, and the smell was terrible because all these people were buried in the ruins. I didn't get them out or anything, but there was well, whatever city you went to was in ruins, which felt good, which felt really good.
As you're listening to some of the testimony by the German defendants, and they're talking about the justification of why they did what they did,
Sure.
how did that impact you personally?
I got mad. I mean, that was orders. Everything was orders. Nobody was guilty because they just followed orders. That was the whole story. I wonder, there was another, next to besides Ohlendorf, there was, and I was very proud, I remember the name, it was Otto Pohl of Vohl, who was administrator of Auschwitz. And, there may have been some individuals who were up for trial. I started something, didn't finish, about working at night. Because one case that I had worked on, I found out the next morning that as he was taken to his cell, he's thrown himself out of the window and killed himself.
Oh, my word.
He was a diplomat. I don't remember who he was.
Does the name Graebe, Graebe,
Graebe?
Graebe, he's mentioned frequently in that book.
As a prosecutor?
No, he was a defendant.
He was a defendant.
And he may have also been involved at Dachau or Auschwitz, but disclosed an awful lot at the trial. But does that name ring any bells?
He had an important position, I take it.
Yeah.
Graebe, maybe. Where was he?
He was
Was
one.
he the commander of?
I honestly don't recall what his position was, but I know much of his testimony was very helpful to the prosecution.
I see.
So I don't recall. I just wondered if that name meant anything to you.
No. I may have known them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Incidentally, in charge of the overall war crimes trial, probably the administration or whatever it was General Telford Taylor. He died about a year or two ago. You didn't ask your friend whether there was another directory that came out?
The only
96.
one, 96 was the only one that he has.
Yeah, I would think most of the people, well, at least half, if not more, of the people who were in the 96 directory have died since then. I mean, we were the younger ones. We were in our 20s, but there were a lot of older people too. Most of them were older than us.
Last October in Jamestown, 4 of the prosecutors came back.
Oh.
Whitney Harris, Bernard Meltzer, Henry King, and a James Conway.
Oh.
One of the attorneys who was unable to come back was a Ted Fenstermacher, and he was the chief prosecutor at the hostage case, which was one of the subsequent cases.
Was that in Nuremberg?
Also at Nuremberg. All of these were at Nuremberg.
Because I once went to was in a beautiful castle or something. They had I think, what was it? Oh, some of the German officers were accused of having killed American officers in cold blood. That was not in Nuremberg, that was somewhere else, I forgot. I only remember that beautiful castle. But it was Malmedy or something. I think it was in Malmedy where it happened. And they were sentenced separately. I don't know whether it didn't take them to Nuremberg, probably. They were overstaffed already in Nuremberg.
I know they had other trials throughout the American zone.
Yes, I think so. No, I remember the Krupp trial, of course, the G.I. Farben, the Otto, what was it again?
Ohlendorf.
Otto Ohlendorf, and then this Oscar, not Oscar, something, Fohl,
Mhm.
Oswald Fohl, and then there were the Einsatzgruppen, there were two more, or there were the diplomats,
Mhm.
and the lawyers, and the doctors. I think now that's 8, I found one more apparently.
And you can add the hostages case.
Oh yeah, the hostages. That I don't even remember.
That case,
I'd really be interested. I mean, this tells you, Michael Masmanot sounds familiar. The name sounds familiar. But, you know, the names all sound familiar, and I don't remember anyone.
well, I think you will specifically enjoy reading this, as names will come out at you that probably will mean much more to you than to us. The case deals with Otto Ohlendorf.
Oh, yes.
He's the star defendant.
Yes.
And it talks about the 4 prosecutors, and one of them is coming to Jamestown in the fall of next year, or fall of this year.
Mm-hmm.
The chief prosecutor, Ben Ferencz.
Uh-huh.
And I will let you know. If
Oh.
that might be fun, just to see Ben, who is
Now, how old is he now?
Ben is 87,
Oh, they're not that much older than I
but
am.
but very, very active,
Uh-huh.
and speaks a lot. So we hope to get him here in the fall.
Now, how did you, now I'm turning this around, how
Sure.
did you get interested in this?
Well, I think Mike was part of that.
Oh, you're both doing it.
And how it
Now, partner, is it law partner or partner in, or both? Or
law
this?
partners.
Uh-huh,
Law
but you're also partner in this,
Well, this
museum.
the Robert Jackson Center is a separate corporation. That's a tax-exempt entity,
uh-huh.
and we've been doing this for a little more than a year. And we've received a lot of funding, a lot of encouragement, and we bought a building, and we're having programming.
Where did the funding come from, the government?
No, individuals.
Oh,
We raised about $1.5 million very quickly,
wow,
so we're off and running.
wow.
Now we're renovating the building and just having a grand time. But how we got into it is we're both, being from the Jamestown area,
Uh-huh.
we both knew of Robert
Well,
Jackson,
you did know him, yes.
but we probably only knew that he was a justice in the
Yes.
Supreme Court,
Uh-huh.
and he was at Nuremberg. Well, Mike was involved in creating a statue.
A statue of Robert Jackson?
For Robert Jackson, yep.
That
For
would
many
explain-
years,
by statute.
attorneys available, that whole concept was new, and that was Jackson. That's what he brought to it.
Mhm.
The Russians, of course, the victorious Russians, they would have just strung them all up without further discussion, you know?
Yeah, that's what.
The British and the French were in between, but Jackson was the one who really advocated
Uh-huh.
the principle that history is better served if we try these
I see.
people, make a record.
Mhm.
And you'll be interested in this as a translator. He also established one of the fundamentals of the trials, that was they were going to rely on documentary evidence far more than they were people's testimony.
Mhm. I
He
see.
thought that that was going to withstand the test of time better
Mhm.
and would be less capable of being accused of being political.
Mhm.
And so your job as a translator was so much more important than it might have been had Jackson
Yeah.
not advocated for documents to be the key to prosecuting and convicting the people instead of witnesses' testimony.
The Germans documented everything, absolutely everything. And of course, on that they were indicted. They could be indicted
Was that-
easily enough.
Was that true of the Eisenstadt-Guten? Is that how you say that? I can't say it
And
either.
that's good.
Was that? Did they document their activities as carefully as?
Well, they had pictures, and I don't know. I mean, I didn't work on the case. I just once in a
You were
while
there.
I got something there, usually eyewitness accounts or something,
Hmm.
but there may have been documented too. How many people they shot in one day, and this and that and the other. I mean,
How long did you stay at Nuremberg?
It was a year and a half, and it was just, I think, slowly falling down, and then finally my, I had the affidavit, what did I have, a visa? I forgot what do you need to come into, so now everybody, they let everybody in. I had applied for, I can't even remember, yeah, I think it must have been a visa. I had applied for a visa 2 weeks after my sister did. And I got that 10 years later then, because you needed a quota number.
I see.
And you had to wait. Now I get so mad when everybody's being let in, and they go on welfare, and we pay with our money, with our tax money, we pay for their whatever it is, and they're all being let in. So my parents, we all had affidavits, and only my sister got in because of the darn quota number.
Did you say that you heard testimony by the commandant of Auschwitz?
I'm sorry.
Did you say
I don't hear very well.
Did you say you had heard testimony from the commandant at Auschwitz, or the manager, or
Well,
some
there was
other?
a trial.
And you were there for some of that trial?
Well, I listened to it.
Uh-huh.
Oh yes, that was a separate trial. Like this Ollendorf, that was a separate trial too. There were some trials for just individuals. Those two were the separate, but these two were the individuals that had been tried in Nuremberg.
And did you know at that time that your parents had died at Auschwitz?
Well, that was after the war already. Yes.
So you knew it already.
I found out after the war. Oh, sure. By that time, I'd found out already. I mean, I was in touch with the Red Cross and so forth, and when we were when they first went to what's it called? Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm.
So some time ago, a few years ago, we were visiting Prague, and so my husband and I took a side trip to Theresienstadt to see. I had thought, they get a room to themselves and this, but it wasn't like this. There were, I don't know how many people were in one room, but you had the men here, the women there, the children in another place. The whole families were pricing apart, but they weren't there very long. The only thing is, 2 years later, my sister from Holland, she came there too, and I can just imagine, she was looking for my parents, and they said, "Oh, they're long dead, they're long gone." I imagined that is what happened.
Mm.
So
your sister was deported from Holland?
From Holland, yeah. She went to Westerbork, which was a concentration camp in Holland, and then she went to Theresienstadt also. I'm not quite sure whether she volunteered or what. We had a cousin who was a doctor, and I think he suggested he come with her, and he'd take care of her, and she can go as a nurse. Not that you know anything about nursing, but anyways. So, and well, he survived, she didn't, so that was one of the things. I'm just wondering about that book. I would love to read it, but we're going away in about 2 or 3 weeks.
Why don't I finish it and I'll send it to you?
Fine, yeah, I think I'd rather you finish, then you're in no hurry.
That's right.
You just have to give me your address so I can mail it to you back, but I'd rather you finish it first because I don't want to be in any hurry to read it.
No.
It's, I'm sure I remember the name. I suppose I remember the face too, but I'm not.
Do any of the pictures on the back, are there any, those are the defendants of that case.
Wait a minute. This is not the main trial.
No, this is not the main trial. No, this is the subsequent trial. This is Otto Ollendorf trial.
I thought he was tried alone once.
He was the principal of the...
Yeah, I thought he was being tried. See, the memory, this is how my memory plays tricks. I thought he was the only one who was being tried.
Well, I think for the purposes of that trial, he was the principal one.
Oh, yes, he definitely was the principal. But I thought maybe he was alone on the stand at one time when
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw. That is probably what happened, because I can't imagine that he would have been the only one to be tried.
Yeah. In fact, Justice Masmano spends a lot of time talking about Otto Ollendorf.
Yeah,
He was so handsome.
so that's why I remember the name.
That's right.
I think he's on the left, but I'm not quite sure. A very well educated. Fans, I don't know. Well, he must be here somewhere, don't you? He was good looking, that I remember. And he, as I say, he was very charming. And then you had to think of what he's been doing.
Yeah. As you reflect back on your experience at Nuremberg and looking at the documents that you saw,
Mm-hmm.
what to you is the legacy of Nuremberg?
Well, I think I told you before, to some extent, I was upset after all that. Most of the defendants were let go after a short time. Of course, it was the Cold War had started.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the whole thing, and I think that's when the whole thing dissolved. Anyhow, and looking at that movie, you have the movie, of course, a documentary of that, and it said something about the scientists. I don't think they ever came to trial. They were just brought to this, like Werner von Braun.
Right.
They were just spirited to the States, and then they worked on I suppose, the atom bomb, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course a lot of, not that they had been in Nuremberg at the time, but a lot of people were let go.
Mm-hmm.
I think was the help of the CIA. Was the CIA in Germany? I don't remember. And the Pope. Some of them went to Argentina or other places.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're still finding at the moment, they're still finding here and there somebody who worked in a concentration camp or so, and they came on here under false pretenses, and then they have a short trial, and then they send them back wherever he came from.
Mm-hmm.
So after all these years still.
I think the time that book was written, they had not arrested Eichmann. The title of the book is Eichmann's Commandos, and I believe the book was written in 1961. But clearly he was the biggest fish who had not been arrested yet.
It must be a very old book, $3.95. Oh!
Yeah, it's 1961, I believe it was
Yeah,
written.
I remember the name, and I think I remember the face too, but if you'd asked me who's Michael Masmano, I wouldn't have known. Let me see when it was. The Eichmann Commandos. It does say the Eichmann Commandos. 10 Days to Die, listen to that. Oh, he's written quite a few books. It's across the street from the courthouse. Across the street from the courthouse verdict. Dedicated to Harry Truman. It was written in 1961. That's 40 years ago.
Yeah. And I know, I don't recall whether he mentioned whether Eichmann had been arrested yet, but Eichmann had not been tried yet.
Oh, that's possible. I don't even remember when he was gone.
Yeah, so early.
Would you like some candy, by the way? I put some
Oh.
candy out.
You
Sure?
are.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been so gracious.
Oh,
This has been really
it was my
terrific.
pleasure.
Really terrific. Did you ever, while you were at Nuremberg, did you keep a diary?
No.
No? Did you ever write letters back to your
I'm
sister?
very disorganized.
Did you write letters to your?
I didn't bring anything back either.
Yeah.
The one thing that I should have brought back is, I don't think you saw it here in the States. Well, you wouldn't know, as I say, you were born afterwards. But it must have been Life magazine, and I think it was only an edition for the armed forces. And there were the pictures of the main defendant after they had been hung. You probably could have used that in your...
Sure.
And I didn't bring it home. I should have brought that home. I mean, that's something...
You would have not known that in the year 2002, 2 lawyers would stop by and interview you.
No. I thought I'd be long dead by that time.
I'm interested when you've described your life in Nuremberg. You say we. Was there a group of you? Did you hang around together? Did you travel together? Was there any
Well,
romance for you there?
No, it was no romance, but I mean, we had friends, and we traveled usually half a dozen. Well, usually I traveled with one person. I had some girlfriends there, and we decided we went. I remember once girlfriend. I think that usually you were put up somewhere. You know, what would I call it? Would you go rent somewhere? I mean, it's something run by the army. It wasn't a hotel or anything.
Like a hostel?
Yeah, I couldn't think of the name. A hostel. And they gave you a blanket and they gave you something and you made your bed and this. And that time I'd forgotten, we came later. And that was Vienna. And I forgot to inform them they didn't have room for us, so we went to a hotel. And as we opened the sheets, they were filthy. So I went down to the desk and I said, would you please change the bed? And they said, we only change them Wednesdays.
Oh.
So we took our stuff and went somewhere else. Absolutely filthy. There's certain things that I remember.
Yeah. But the people that you were traveling with all worked for
Most of
the
them were
war crimes
translators,
trials?
yes. We were in the same group and so forth, yes.
I think Greg asked you this, but do you stay in touch with any of those people anymore? Do you know where any of them are?
Well, there's just one friend I had been in touch with. She died a couple of years ago. And another friend, she lives in London. And that's just about all.
The two of you?
I think I've stayed in touch more with people in censorship for some reason or other. So, well, one is very sick right now, and she's had just about everything wrong with her. She was much younger than I, but now her husband died, and I don't know who takes care of her. And that's just about it. It's, as I say, almost 55 years is a long time.
I'm going to introduce you. I will introduce you sometime when you come to Jamestown.
I don't know how to get there.
We'll get you there. Probably when Mr. Ferencz comes to Jamestown to talk, and he was the prosecutor of that case that you're going to read about.
The Einsatzgruppe?
Right. He was the chief prosecutor.
Oh.
So I think you'd have fun meeting him. There's a lady who lives in Erie, Pennsylvania, who also was a translator and worked probably in a different case. But she, in fact, she worked on the I.G. Farben case.
Well, I mean, we were all together
yeah.
in the group, yes.
And
what's her name?
Her name now is Mrs. John Bowler, Bowler.
What was her maiden name?
I know.
If she had
I
one?
knew you would ask that. I don't know.
Well, I can look it up in the directory, if her name is in the directory. The two of us are the only ones from Western New York?
Yeah. Well, one other person that was in the book, in the directory, a lady by the name of Margot Lipton, who lived in Lewiston.
She lives in Lewiston. What did she do?
I haven't been able to catch up with her since the address doesn't lend itself to a phone number, and the directory assistance doesn't show her, and she may have passed away since 1996. But her name.
You have an address for her?
I do. I only have a P.O. box. So I don't know what that means. When we cross the bridge at Lewiston, we may detour and try to see if we can find the name Margot Lipton.
Oh.
But her husband, John Bowler, who just passed away, was an attorney on the I.G. Farben case.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where they met.
They met, yes.
She was a translator and he was an attorney.
Yeah, well, this friend of mine who just passed away, she met her husband too. I mean, her husband is still alive, and he informed me that she had died, but they met there too.
I'll be darned.
And a few people, somebody else. I just mentioned that somebody asked me whether I knew Leo Katz, and he and his wife met there too. So quite a few. I didn't. I had to wait till I kind of came here.
How did you end up coming to Western New York?
My sister lived here. My sister lived in Buffalo, and I came. I was alone, and I figured I'd go to San Francisco. I was told it's the most beautiful city in the States, and why not? So I came here. I met my husband. I got stuck in Buffalo, and about 10 years later, she went to San Francisco. Well, actually, she went to Oakland, but which is just
same thing.
across the bridge from San Francisco.
Now that's a good story.
Yeah. Sounds like a sister.
Pardon me?
Let me ask you, going back again, I'm curious, when they offered you the position to translate,
Yes.
did they warn you that you were going to be translating things and hearing things that were difficult or unpleasant or anything like that?
No, they just
a job
I
and-
had to take a test, and that was it.
Uh-huh, okay.
So no, just
Interesting.
And it sounded like what you were translating was pretty much armament.
well, most of the time. Yeah, occasionally something else came in.
You really weren't put in a position to translate orders concerning Auschwitz or the slave labor.
Not so much. I mean, and mostly the guns. I mean, the
Yeah.
ammunition, whatever
Mhm.
it was. But I thought that was a waste of time, quite frankly.
Mhm.
I mean, if I'd been on the what did I say before, the
Slave labor? Okay.
yes, slave labor. I mean, that would have made sense. I mean, I did get a little bit of that too,
Mhm.
but I didn't think that was really important. There were more important things to concern themselves with.
Who's the history buff? I notice a lot of your books are
My
history.
husband, to some extent, I read some of them, but
Yeah.
he's just bought him for his birthday another one. I think it's in the den. Well, he's retired. He reads a lot. I don't have that much time to read. Otherwise, I would read the book and finish it by the time we go away. But I have another book I'm reading right now, so I mean, if I can keep it as long as once you've read it, and I return it for your museum.
Exactly.
And
Perfect.
how did you find a thing like that?
It was on the internet.
Oh, I see.
So
Oh, you asked for anything concerning the
Nuremberg.
trial?
Mhm.
Nuremberg. Oh,
and this was an unusual book, so that's what I got it.
yes.
And on the internet, you pay just a little bit more than $3. That's not much more.
Well, I can't believe they once sold books for free. Yeah, this looks very, very real. You know, here this officer gives the command, and they're shooting these people. Very much so. You don't have any books that concern themselves just with people who have been in concentration camps or so. I mean, you're concentrating just on Nuremberg, right?
Right now, yeah. We have not gone into the Holocaust
Yeah.
part of it, though last July, the curator of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, Michael Berenbaum, came to Chautauqua Institution and then came down to our Jackson Center
Uh-huh.
and spent 3 hours with us to talk about how he created the Holocaust Museum and gave us tremendous advice
Okay.
and direction as to how to get funding.
Uh-huh.
In
So you
fact-
did very well.
He-
Direction how to get funding.
Oh, he did very well.
You have been to the Holocaust Museum,
Yes,
of course.
yes, that is very, very moving.
Yes,
What did you think when you saw it?
the same as you. very moving. Upsetting,
Yeah.
too. Very upsetting. And I didn't see they have since I saw it, they had a special exhibit on the children.
Mhm.
And that I did not see. I think there's stars. I also have been doing Yad Vashem in Israel. So I think it was it's so long ago I can't remember. I think it was outside Jerusalem or somewhere. So that was. And there was one. What was the movie called? It was endless. There was one. I forgot what he was called. It was all about Auschwitz. Did you see that movie?
Mm.
It lasted 3 hours. I can't remember what it was called. I'm sure you would want that.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, after a while, I didn't think I wanted to see it, and I didn't go. But they had it was performed in 2 separate sections because it was very long. But at least half of it, you saw the trains going, so you could actually delete that.
Mhm.
And what was it? There was one man who interviewed different people
Mhm.
from Auschwitz. I can't remember if but you should get that. You should get a copy of that movie. If I could only think of what it was.
It was.
It's endless.
And it was shown in Chautauqua Institution this year.
Probably.
And I couldn't get a seat. I went to. It was just packed.
You saw it?
I couldn't. No, it was too full. The movie theater they were showing it, and
Oh,
you just
really?
couldn't get in. But that documentary was put out by Berenbaum, Michael Berenbaum.
Uh-huh.
He is currently the head of the Shoah Foundation,
Uh-huh.
and which is designed to interview people who survived the Holocaust.
Uh-huh.
And so they put together this documentary.
The film was entitled Show.
Well, Steven Spielberg has something too. He's been interviewing people.
That's
Yes,
That's the same
part of the
thing.
Oh, I
same
see.
group.
That's it.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg's up here,
Up here.
and Michael Berenbaum works for Spielberg.
Oh, I see. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Michael's his job is to make it happen. Steven Spielberg provides the money
The money. Yes.
to make it happen.
Yes.
Well, you've been gracious. We've taken up your time, and
Oh, that's quite fine. I enjoyed talking with you.
and we will send the book to you, and we will keep you posted. 'Cause we will certainly invite you when Mr. Ferenc comes, and
Okay.
I think you might enjoy.
Very good.
Uh,
How far are you from Buffalo, actually?
just,
I don't think I've ever been in Jamestown.
no more than an hour and a half.
Uh-huh. Did you come on the New York Thruway, or do you know?
Thruway to exit 59, which is Fredonia, Dunkirk
see.
exit, and then you just go south from there.
Well, I've been to Fredonia. I think we went to it. Did we? We've been to Elder Hostel or something. I think they had something up in Fredonia.
Right.
Have you been to Chautauqua?
Oh, many times. Yes.
Well, you've
then
been close to Jamestown.
You're right
Yeah,
there then.
my husband said something. I said, "Where's Jamestown?" I think, well, I haven't been there. Maybe we passed through it on the way to
Yeah.
Chautauqua.
Then from Chautauqua, you're only 15 minutes.
Oh, yes. Oh, that close.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't go last year, but we've been pretty much every year or every other year at
Sure.
least. So,
You sound very well traveled. You and your
Traveled?
husband still travel to Europe and so forth?
oh, we have been traveling a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
We've been just about everywhere. I think we've been around my husband figured out we've been around the world a couple of times.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, he's retired, and as long as we can do it, there will come a time when we can't do it anymore, but at this moment, we were in Tahiti not too long ago, which was very nice.
Oh, nice. You been back to Germany since the Nuremberg? No interest.
Didn't want to go. It was funny, one time, I forgot where I was, maybe in Norway or somewhere, there was a German, You know, actually, people that are younger than we, quite a bit younger, you can't blame them. Like people your age or so. But somebody our age, if there's anybody left, I wouldn't want to talk to them. I remember there was a German in the elevator, and he asked me something, and he asked something in German. He wanted the floor or something. I said, "Fifth floor." I couldn't even say it in German. I wouldn't buy a German car either.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally I buy something and then I see made in Germany, but it doesn't happen very often. It's usually made in Japan or China or somewhere.
You just don't have a choice. That's right.
Well, my car is I think it's made even here. Toyota, I think it's originally Japan, I don't know. But I wouldn't want to buy a Volkswagen or, I wouldn't buy a Mercedes. I don't think I would go that high anyhow. But, yeah.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
Oh,
It's a
you're very
pleasure.
welcome
It's just been
indeed.
great.